We're going to talk about elk hunting, and specifically this particular elk. This is a huge bull elk that I killed around a dozen years ago. This is the biggest bull that I've taken in going to be 56 years of elk hunting. And this bull has a 52 1/4 inch wide spread, inside spread here. The main beam is 54 1/4 inches long. This bull has 6 points on this side, and he's got 8 on the other side. And anyway, this bull scores out at 384 5/8 inches. There's a lot of people that elect to kill a bull like this. I've seen 2 other bulls like this in my lifetime. This is the only bull in my lifetime of hunting that I had an opportunity to kill of this size. I've killed many bull elk, but the fact of the matter is that these are very scarce, anything this size, especially something as massive as this. The huge burrs, which is the knurled base on the antler, the rough antlers, the shape of this rack, the width of it, the length of these royal, these are referred to as the royal points on an elk. And anyway, the very long points that we have here, and the upswept, basically eye guard type points and so forth. This bull lived a long time, somewhere around 11, 12 years old, I would say. But anyway, I'll tell a story here about this bull. And I'd saddled up a couple of animals. I'd saddled up my mule Festus and my horse Doc. Doc, you know, was a lot like a mule, and Festus and Doc were buddies. Anyway, I headed in the mountains by myself, like I normally hunt most of the time by myself, because I have the best success, and there isn't any kind of interference or anything else. So anyway, I'd headed in the mountains, and you know, not long after daylight, I'd positioned myself a couple hundred yards from my animals, and I had them tied up, and I had my rifle and my day pack with me, and my binoculars and my rangefinder, and I sat down beside a big rock in an area where I knew elk to travel at times, and I didn't know whether I was going to have an opportunity to see an elk. And after a while, across the creek from me some distance, I see some movement. I can see some movement in the timber, and I'm glassing often, and there's quite a lot of timber, and there's open meadowed hillsides and rocky promontories and ridge lines and one thing and another. And so after a bit, this bull stepped into view, and when he stepped kind of into view, he stepped into view with the left side of him showing. And so that bull was headed basically from my left to my right. And when I saw that, I immediately put my rangefinder on there, and it said 352 yards. And well, I got kind of crouched down a little bit, and I rested my 300 Weatherby across, you know, leaned down, got down kind of low, and I rested my rifle on this knee, and I let him have a 200 grain nozzle partition, you know, right in the boiler room. Well, he flinched as near as I could tell. He never went down. And I racked another round in the rifle, and as opportunity presented itself kind of through the openings in these trees, I shot again. And I just stayed right there after I loaded another round in the rifle and put the safety on and see just what was going on here. So anyway, that elk was still standing there. And well, I didn't want to shoot him in because I knew that I had two bullets in him. And I knew that both shots were good, but the elk hadn't got the message. And so I gathered up my day pack and put my rifle on my shoulder, and I headed to my mule and my horse, and I untied them, and I tied the horse to the mule, hooked him to the saddle horn, and I took off walking, and I had to cross the two forks of a creek, and I crossed both forks, and I got over the other side, and that bull was actually still on his feet. And now this is probably a time lapse of, I don't know, 15-20 minutes or something like that at the very least. And I tied Festus to a tree, and I walked on up. He wasn't about to go anyplace, and anyway, I walked up and I got about 35 yards from him, and I got a real good rest, and he hadn't gotten the message with two lethal rounds in the boiler room. And so anyway, I got rested against a tree, and I shot him in the neck where I'd break his neck, and he piled up. And when he piled up, he was in kind of a real particular or peculiar situation, peculiar position, to be able to try and butcher him and one thing and another. And well, after a long period of time, I did get him butchered. And in the process of trying to, get this elk butchered out and everything, so that I can cut him up into pieces and cut him into quarters, I was trying to cut one of these quarters off, and I cut my hand, and I cut all the flesh off the end of this left thumb, just like that. Of course, I don't have a knife unless it's just razor sharp, and a lot safer with a sharp knife than you are a dull one. But it don't take long to dull the best knife blade, on 1/4 inch thick elk hide. And anyway, I always carry bandages and emergency things in my day pack, and I let it bleed good and let it hang down and let it bleed and drip. And anyway, I put a gauze bandage over it, and I put some adhesive tape around it, and I had some surgical gloves, and so I put a surgical glove on that hand, and to keep any material getting in there from this elk and so forth. So I had my hand very well protected, and I had to change that glove once through the whole process of things because it was pretty well filled up with, as time goes by, because it takes many hours by yourself to butcher one of these animals. And so I finished butchering this bull, and my thumb's hurting. It's just hurting like the dickens. It just, and anyway, I got him all cut up into the 5 pieces. Basically, there's 4 quarters, and then there's a length of back strap, to make the 5th piece. And anyway, plus, I had the head caped down to the antlers, and I had the head cut off, and so I had quite a situation, and I got everything loaded on Doc and Festus, and except for the antlers, and I knew that without a doubt that Doc would carry the antlers, but I'd never tried to put a big elk rack on Festus. Well, I eased up to him and I set that elk rack up there, and as soon as that elk rack hit the saddle, he went to jumping and a bucking and a throwing a fit. And I was all prepared, and I jumped out of the way. And that son of a gun, bucked this elk rack off, and then he jumped clear over the width of the top of the elk rack, just jumped clear across it. Standing there snorting and on one thing and another. And well, I knew that I wasn't going to carry this elk rack on Festus. And, he would carry meat just fine, but he would not have anything to do with these big mean looking antlers.
We think that somebody packed antlers on him and he got poked before.
Well,
being a mule.
A mule, he might have got poked. I mean, he had a few years on him when I picked him up, and he was a wonderful, wonderful animal, and it's not a fault of his or nothing. It's just a matter that he didn't want to carry that big elk rack, and so I rested a little bit, and I thought, well, I'll put my day pack on him. I got other things on him, and then I'll get this rack and put it on dock. And so I put the rack on dock in the normal fashion. When you got a big elk rack, you set the nose forward, and of course I've got the dock had a pack saddle, so I had a better ability to be able to tie things. You can tie things easier on a pack saddle than you can onto a riding saddle. So I positioned everything, where I could put this rack on there, and lo and behold, he didn't care for the fact that rack was sticking way up, because what you do, you cut a limb wider than the elk rack, and then you tie that limb across this elk rack back here, and so that when you've got this sitting right on top of the pack, and the antler points are going to the back, and they're clearing the horse by this far. But anyway, that's sitting way up there. The only way that you can support it is with the leg stick, from the knee joints sticking up out of the pack saddle, up out of the panniers. Basically, you normally can support that by those knees. Well, he didn't like the height of it. Now, he wasn't of the attitude to buck anything, but he just didn't care for it, and I didn't need another rodeo. So anyway, I abandoned the idea of having the limb across there, and I just simply put this rack on him, and to each side, I tied things and supported things in such a way that this rack was just hanging over the, if you can imagine. Now, this horse is this wide, but this rack is 52.5 inches inside spread. So it's this far on this far on each side of this, on each side of dock, just basically hanging down and just barely, only 3, 4, 5 inches up off the ground, and one thing another. But I had it tied in such a way, that it couldn't get over against him from either side and goose him to have another rodeo. So I tied Festus, to my horse, and I tied him with a breakaway. And a breakaway is you take the lead rope, and then you take just a piece of baler twine, and you've got it hooked to your saddle, and you tie it into the halter rope, so that if they pull back and they create any disturbance, that light baler twine will bust, rather than just tying directly a lead rope, which is a lot tougher than a piece of baler twine. So you have to do these things, and you learn how to do these things, over a lot of years. And I packed hundreds of elk out, but this is the biggest elk rack and the most difficult. And I simply held real close, on his halter, right under his chin. And I had 3.5 miles to walk out leading these packed animals, and you know, I'd walk kind of with my head turned kind of one direction or the other, watching, and if this rack even tended to kind of get a little closer one way or the other, he'd instantly stop, which is a very good thing and a very wonderful animal that, you know, that you can handle him this way. They're invaluable animals like this, and I've had several good mules since I've lost my Festus and Doc, but I've never had a situation where I've had animals that were maybe as good as the two of those were together in one thing another. But anyway, it took me quite a while to walk out and easily, you know, have to, where the creek crossing is and one thing another, where I had to cross the creek to get out of there. Three times I had to cross the creek to get out of there, and where the forks were of the creek, and then lower down country more near where my truck and trailer were parked. But anyway, you know, good wide area to be able to get across the creek and have clearance, and I thought that all out before I did anything, so that I knew what we could do and what we couldn't do. And anyway, both of these 200 grain nozzle partitions, you know, I ran those at 3,050 feet a second at the muzzle, and both those bullets performed wonderfully. And I found a bullet, you know, in against the far side. But you got to understand that when you hunt enough like I have, that you can't fault that bullet. That bullet, you know, that elk was gonna die. He didn't go 20 feet from the first shot. He was all filled full of blood when I cut him open and one thing another, but he just hadn't. He was still running on what was left, and that's still one of our very, very best hunting bullets that we have, is the nozzle partition. And I've killed, you know, several hundred head of animals with nozzle partitions, all size of animals, from antelope size animals up to big elk like this. And anyway, you know, it was a relief to get clear back down to my truck and my trailer and be able to tie them up. And of course, the first thing you want to do, you want to get that elk rack off, and I got the elk rack off and got it up, you know, out of the way and everything, and then I was able to unpack those animals. And you know, it's not an easy job, because you know, you're looking at 125, 150 pound 4 quarters that you have to lift up on these animals to pack them and one thing another. And you know, I was in pretty good shape. I'm still in pretty good shape, but I can't lift that much anymore. I won't try it anymore. That's how I used to pack things. Anymore, I just simply will bone the entire animal out, and it makes everything easier. You got lots of pieces in one thing another, but you're not overstressed and overworked with trying to lift these heavy quarters into the panniers. And anyway, you know, the thing that I want to show you here is this is the rifle, and this is a 364 Winchester Model 70, and I have it in a board and rim rock stocks. They haven't been made for quite a few years. This is a very straightforward, simple hunting stock. This is the type of rifle that I basically like to hunt with. This has got a Varex 2 3 to 9 Leopold scope on it with a dot reticle, and as I've mentioned many times before, I prefer dot reticles, and the human eye goes absolutely natural to a dot, and if you ever used one and gave it a little bit of a chance, you'd find that it's the superior type of a reticle. You know, there's no other, there's no extra extra hash marks or anything like that in this, to do with this reticle. It's just simply a dot reticle. But I know where this rifle shoots, you know. I know where it shoots out to 600 yards, and I don't have any intention of, you know, changing the scope. This is something that satisfies me. The scope sets down low where it should. It's handy. It's a rifle that you can carry, and unlike a lot of these things that I see anymore, that people don't have a clue what they need for a hunting rifle. That's what I've got to say about, you know, this particular hunt.